All right. Hey, folks, we're going to get started here in a little bit. I'm Dave Mantica. I do marketing here at SDV. I have with me Mark Blevins and John Tersant. So before we get going, introduce ourselves. We're just going to kind of talk a bit. So, Mr. Mark, I
Yes,
hear
sir.
that you were in a snowstorm.
I was. I was in Lower Slower, Delaware, the place of my nativity, on January 6th, and was in about a foot of snow getting stuck, trying to get back down south.
Oh my gosh, how bad was the driving?
I got stuck 3 times trying to get out of one subdivision, and it was literally a foot thick.
Were you driving front wheel or back wheel drive?
I was driving a little Hyundai Elantra, so front wheel drive, which
Wheel
is
drive.
not suited for any snow. But I got out.
Oh man, oh man, I love it. I love it. I
Oh,
love it. I love it. At least you weren't driving your beat up Mercedes. Now, our boy Mark here is trying to rebuild a Mercedes.
let me tell you, that $200 Mercedes, because that's what I paid for it, $200 would have been abandoned.
Now, what's it worth now? 250?
As the price of steel went up, I don't know what you get for a ton, but I got about 1.5 tons of steel sitting out my driveway. So
Oh
whatever
my
the whatever
gosh.
whatever scrap value is.
Whatever the scrap value is. I'm still waiting for Josh's cue for us to go into LinkedIn. All right, we are live on LinkedIn, folks. Here we are. All right, my name is David Mantica. I work with SDV in marketing. I have two fantastic gurus with me today. We're going to talk about winning federal government contracts, but let's introduce our gurus first. So we'll start with John. John, introduce yourself, brother.
Hi, everybody. I'm John Toussaint. I am one of the sales directors here at SDV Medical.
And it's
Hello,
your
everyone.
LinkedIn that has all the invites.
Hello, everyone. I appreciate everybody taking the time to join us here.
All right, now we have Mr. Mark Blevins. Mark, introduce yourself, please, sir.
Yeah, howdy. This is Mark Blevins. I'm the executive vice president of contracts here at SDV.
Man, it's great having both of you in the action. John, what do they call you, like the mayor when you walk around VAs because you know so many of the VA folks. You've been to all the hospitals, right, John?
I've been to all of them at least 5 times over, David. I know a few of the people, a few of the players out there.
And then, Mark, how many contracts have you approved? Billions of dollars worth of contracts when you were to
Over the years, it's been a lot. I don't have an exact number. I
Did you
didn't keep
spend
track.
more of Reagan's money or more of Bush's money or more of Clinton's money? Whose money did you spend the most of?
I would have to say,
Was it W?
no, I would say it was during Trump's first administration.
You spent some good money.
Yeah, I signed a few that were in the billions. So
So let's just say Mark has a lot of experience with this, folks, for sure. So what we're talking about first, we're going to talk about winning and losing a government contract. But before that, Mark, why don't you kind of give us a roundup of what we talked about last time?
yeah, the first time we chit-chatted, we talked about the government buying commercial supply items and services. We talked about the main form, which is an SF 1449, which is the standard form. The importance of, immediately looking at box number 10 on that form because it tells you the NACE code, whether or not the procurement is set aside for small businesses, whether or not there is a socioeconomic category set aside. And we just talked about the importance of NACE codes and services versus supply items. And then the last time we spoke, we chit-chatted about how it would be optimal if the federal government would state right up front in any of its solicitations what procedures are using. We talked about FAR Part 12, which is the acquisition of commercial supply items and services, and how FAR Part 12 is always linked to either FAR Part 13 or 14 or 15. We discussed how we can kind of get rid of FAR Part 14, which is sealed bidding, because I think it's been 20 years since I've done a sealed bidding type of procedure. And then we talked about the thresholds.
Okay, so the interesting thing is you were wearing your contracting officer a hat a lot there, right? You're really getting into the details of how these things were put together,
Yeah.
what things you have to be thinking about, right? And John, you remember that there's a lot of detail, right, associated with that. Anything come to mind that you really hit you when you think back, or not really?
I mean, coming to my mind, it's all of the stuff that Mark mentioned. To be quite honest, I mean, because my concern is always this, right? At least in my type of role, is it worth it to respond to the bid, right? I mean, what is the likelihood that we're actually going to win it, right? I mean, is it to Mark's point, right, is there a set aside that's for a category that's different from the category that I happen to be able to participate in? And those types of things are, what immediately comes to mind.
All right. So the winning and losing. So let's talk about that now. We're going to talk about winning and losing. I want to be the first loser. Isn't that what they say in racing, right? NASCAR racing. Who's going to be the first loser? Who comes in second?
I don't know. Ricky Bobby said if you're not first, you're last. So maybe that's
Ricky Bobby is everything. If Ricky Bobby said it, it's the truth.
Yeah. So maybe that's the parallel to that.
All right. So we're going to talk about winning and losing. Like John says, so John's out there. He's SDV. He's trying to get great medical equipment into the VA. That's critically important to him. So he's looking at these contracts, trying to figure out if he can win and lose. So Mark, let's talk about winning and losing with government picks. What's going on?
Well, I as a caveat, some folks may take umbrage with the notion and be saying, hey, it's all about winning and losing. But, let's be honest.
That's life.
When you look at an SF 1449, there's only one name at box 17A. There's only one winner of a government contract. Now, I know some folks say, well, I didn't win, but I ended up being a subcontractor. So, I mean, if that is your business model, hey, I just want to kind of do some work here, although I don't have direct privity of contract with the government, then so be it. But yeah, there's only one winner. And, the government over the years has shifted to these bigger and bigger contracts that customarily go on for 5 years, normally like a base year followed by 4 successive 1-year option periods. So if you're not winning that government contract, you're kind of out of that ball game for 5 years.
Unless you can play your games with trying to be a subcontractor, right? But like you said, that's an entirely different business model.
Or, let's assume that whatever you're selling to the government or trying to sell to the government, you can sell it to different agencies. But if you're kind of focused on just one agency and you don't get that contract, you're kind of, left out in the cold for 5 years.
Yeah. First off, before we go deeper into this, do you ever see that changing?
No, as a matter of fact, it's getting worse because SDV authored an article about how there's been a radical decline in small business participation in the federal landscape, which was kind of a side topic we just discussed during the first session we had. And no, because procurement officials are watching literally 50% of businesses leave the federal landscape. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that the government has it's a trend. It's bigger and bigger contracts, dollar-wise, buying more and more services so that it's a lot less work for the government. But, the consequence of that is you're getting rid of a lot of these really small firms, or you're just getting rid of folks who realize, hey, I just can't stick around for 5 years.
Oh, we got a lot to talk about with that, right? So let me tell you, put your contracting officer hat, and you talk to me about this thing about the best value continuum.
Yeah.
What is this best value continuum?
Well, I mean, as a taxpayer, we expect and anticipate the government is going to use our tax dollars and seek and acquire best value for those dollars spent. So, the government always has a phrase or a term, and it talks about the best value continuum, meaning how does the government acquire best value? And then on one end of that continuum spectrum is the lowest price, technically acceptable approach. And then on the other end of the spectrum, price is no longer the most important evaluation factor, but you're trading price for something else. And it could be anything. It could be speed of delivery, or it could be a certain performance parameter. I mean, it's really up to the type of procurement. So it's a trade-off.
Why would they want to do that? What's the why in that?
Well, I mean, in some instances, it would be appropriate. Like, for example, in the middle, you could have what's called a comparative analysis approach. But I think for the purposes of today's discussion, we kind of look at the two ends of that continuum or that spectrum. And, sometimes, the government may say, we really don't want the lowest price. We want to acquire something that's bigger, it's better, it's faster, it's more technically, sophisticated, and we're willing to pay that price premium.
But, okay, that makes sense. But the way things are setting up, there's less and less vendors to choose from. So there's less and less opportunity to get that big, new, cool thing.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem. If you get rid of half of the selling community, the notion of competition is now theoretically at least sliced in half. And how many vendors are really out there able to that who can truly competitively quote or propose to these really large IDIQs? There's not many.
Yeah.
And then, then you start saying, well, hey, going back to one of our prior discussion points, when you look at box number 10, is this a small business set aside? Okay, let's say the government says it is. How many small businesses can really meet the government's needs, especially when they start saying, well, price really isn't that important as compared to something else. We want to trade that price for some other type of, performance metric.
You got 55 PhDs that work for you. John, you have some thoughts. I saw your facial expressions. What do you got here?
Yeah, thank you, David. What I found in my own personal experience, right, is the bigger the contracts that I'm trying to go after, right, if you will, what I find is that those are not necessarily the lowest price technically acceptable, right? It seems to be more complex and things of that nature. Is the vast majority of the larger dollar value contracts that way, or do you find that they're lowest price technically acceptable?
Yeah, I mean, it's a trend, because I remember years ago, I mean, everything seemed to be focused on LPTA, lowest price technically acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that, and there's jokes about it. People are saying, hey, here's a government program, and that contractor must have been the lowest priced one. But about 10 years ago, there's a shift where they said, okay, yeah, we don't want to do the LPTA anymore. We want to do the trade-off. And now, if you want to do LPTA, you pretty much have to justify in writing why lowest price technically acceptable is somehow not appropriate, which is crazy in my opinion. Just my opinion. I mean, I just don't understand.
So as a contracting officer, you got to actually get approval to do lowest price technically acceptable now.
Yeah, for the larger procurements, absolutely.
And who listens? Like, if you look at the ecosystem within what the contracting officer has to deal with, who are they trying to justify that to?
Well, let me tell you, I think, I don't know how it was back during the 50s and 60s during your time, Dave, but I can tell you during my time, you have all sorts of folks involved in this process telling the CO what
I would just talk to Kennedy himself, man. He would.
And it's amazing. You have, all these different folks who want to weigh in and tell the contracting officer what he or she needs to do.
So which is amazing. Ton of people pounding on that the CO's head.
Yeah, you got program folks, you have the customers, you have umpteen different people in the policy department. Depending on your agency and the dollar thresholds, you could have someone from OGC, which is, Office of Government Counsel, the lawyers, weighing in. And then all of a sudden you realize, as the CO, when you look at box 31, A, B, and C, there's only one signature.
That's the CO's.
That's a contracting officer signature. It has his name typed out, the date, and his or her signature. But by and large, again, that's one reason why I decided it's time for me to leave the federal government. You have all sorts of people telling you, and a lot of times all these so-called experts are telling you that you shouldn't be doing something a certain way because they know better or they've determined otherwise. And my thought was, then you sign the contract. If you think that you got a better way to build a mousetrap, I invite you.
Let me ask you this question. So winners and losers, who's influencing those people that are chirping in the contracting officer's ear?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people behind the scenes that you don't really ever identify. Like, for example, if you give a program office $10 million to spend, they're going to spend $10 million or more. If you give them $50 million, coincidentally, that $10 million project is now magically we're scored at $50 million. So a lot of times you really don't want the lowest price technically acceptable solution. You want to spend more money because you want to get rid of those dollars.
So you just want to burn the cash.
Well, I can tell you, at my
Catch-22, like you read the book Catch-22, he's flying in and they're burning tires so they get their budget again for next year.
I can tell you, I've been at many agencies where at 11:59 p.m. on September 30th, I was signing that agency's last contract action. So yeah, you'll find all sorts of dollars that they find at the last minute, dollars swept. And then all of a sudden you realize it's a spending frenzy. And I think a
So-
lot of that's driven by the dollars.
So, John, do you see that? So you've been in this world for a while. I mean, Mark sees it. He was wearing the hat. So this model's now set up for, hey, I got this cash I want to burn.
I tell you what, David, I spent a lot of September the 29th, late in the afternoon, late in the evening, late at night, trying to take advantage of, hey, we're ready to buy it right now. Absolutely.
And, you know, Dave, the crazy thing is what I never quite understood, all these different program offices who's had these requirements and these contracts that are cooking for years, when it comes time for the replacement vehicle, it's always a surprise.
Yeah, we were talking about this beforehand.
Yeah.
So get into this a little bit more. This is intriguing to me.
Yeah. I mean, if I sign a contract today is the 16th of January, and let's assume that contract has a 1-year base period followed by 4 consecutive option periods. It is miraculous that somehow everyone is surprised that the contract's coming to an end 5 years from now.
So no work is done to even try to make it better, to source other vendor.
It doesn't seem like it. And then you sit there and you try to have these discussions with the program folks and the customers saying, listen, why can't you just determine what level of technical acceptability is required to meet your requirement? Set the technical acceptability standards at that level to simply tell the selling community, this is what you have to have as a minimum, and make price the determinative factor.
Yeah.
I mean, you get rid of a lot of protest. I can tell you
You
that.
you already know what the program, you already know what you got, right? You have 5 years.
You would think. I mean, some of these contracts are second, third, fourth, fifth iterations. They've been going on for decades.
And it just keeps, so they always use the trade-off model.
It seems like that. And again,
not always, but it seems like the trade-off
Yeah.
model to go to.
And again, my sympathies to those program offices, because you have turnover in the civil service.
Mhm.
And, you know, if you're buying something only once every 5 years, you're not going to be a pro at it. I mean, if you're only doing something once every 5 years, and a lot of times, you know, whoever's serving on these technical evaluation committees, hey, let's be honest, that may be their first and only time doing it. So it's not an easy task at all.
Yeah, it's a whole lack of expertise, right? There's a whole lack of understanding of what they're actually buying. So, John, when you hear this as an SDV guy, you know, you're trying to win these bids. When you hear this, what are you thinking? I mean, there's a lot of folks out there that are probably listening to us who are in your shoes.
Absolutely. The first thing that I'm thinking personally is, okay, so if there is no tickler or reminder, if you will, that'll pop up to say, hey, this contract is getting ready to expire. The first thing that I'm thinking of is, I better get out there, build some relationships with some folks and proactively figure out which way is up so I can position myself such that
you're just gonna have to go out there and, okay, I know this thing's coming up. They're not even knowing that. I got to go out there and start working it.
Yeah. I've got to be the one to bring it up to somebody. That's my first thought process.
So there could be a really great vendor out there that has everything they need, but they have no idea what's going on. So the government's never going to get that service.
Or better yet, I mean, think about this. Let's say I'm a vendor.
Yeah.
And I realize, hey, here comes a contracting opportunity that just popped up. It pops up around March or April.
Mm-hmm.
It shows up on sam.gov. It says, hey, your proposals due mid-June, July 4th weekend timeframe.
Yep.
And it's asking for, you know, I don't know, 30 folks to do whatever technical services for the government.
Yep.
How many small businesses really got 30 folks sitting around twiddling their thumbs waiting to jump on a government contract?
No, they don't. None. Zero. Unless they're partnering. Unless they have a partner person running around trying to find another company to service it.
Or, you know, they're a big business that has a large, you know, workforce that has a bunch of W-2s who, you know, are available. But, you know, and this is the dilemma that the government finds itself in. You know, they post these things. By and large, a lot of small businesses are kind of caught off surprise unless, hey, they're the loser from 5 years ago and they're waiting for their next crack at bat.
That's the only way they know.
And basically, and then all of a sudden they realize, well, if I don't win it again, I'm out of pocket for a collective total of 10 years. I'm not going to play anymore.
Yeah.
So, and then they are looking and say, well, wait a second. this is no longer, or it's not an LPTA. They're trading something off, and they want to hire the best and the brightest for whatever, government service. How's that small business really going to have the best and the brightest on staff unless, they realize this whole game is kind of structured around now these 5-year cycles. Now, not every contract has a 5-year cycle. I mean, you can see sometimes
it's moving towards there. What you're saying, hey, if you're listening to this, you got to be aware that this 5-year thing is the trend.
Yeah. And now people say, well, wait a second, I just saw a contract. It's a 1-year base. That's it. Or it's a 1-year base and a, 1-year option. Yeah. A lot of contracts have a shorter duration, but when you start looking at the collective dollars that are obligated every fiscal year, the trend is to these giant IDIQs. So yeah, I mean, it's tough for the small business because, it's almost incomprehensible to think about telling a small business that we need your proposal in 30 days, sometimes a shorter period of time because it's commercial. If it's a commercial service or a commercial supply item, the government could set a shorter period. I think the shortest period I've seen upheld by a border court is 3 days, but normally for the bigger ones, you get 30 days.
Mm-hmm.
In 30 days, you're trying to slap something together, which may be novel because you haven't looked at it for 5 years or you didn't even know about it.
Yeah.
But you're trolling sam.gov. You see an opportunity pop up. And then all of a sudden you realize, price isn't the driver. It's something else other than price, some other evaluation factor. And then all of a sudden you realize, okay, well, my widget has to be operating like a Ferrari versus a Chevy because the government's now saying, well, we don't care about the dollars. We care about how fast your car can go, for example. Or, we want to make sure you can deliver these services in 3 business days versus, the commercial practice of 5 days. And then you wonder, well, wait a second. Why is the government wanting, for example, a speed, how quickly you can do something when the commercial marketplace could care less? 5 days, is the industry standard, but you'll see a lot of
why
those.
do they care? Yeah, why do they care? And that decision's happening from this large group of people pecking at the contracting officer's ear, and then it just ends up being in there for some reason.
Right. And then all of a sudden, then you got the CO trying to, the good COs are kind of reading between the tea leaves that says, okay, I did my own market research. There's only 3 real players in arena that are small businesses. You do a little market research, a little business intelligence, and you realize vendor A can deliver his or her pizza in 30 minutes. Vendor 2 can deliver his pizza in 45 minutes, and vendor C can deliver his pizza in an hour. The government says, okay, well, hey, I want that Domino's-like guarantee. I want you to deliver my pizza in 30 minutes. I mean, again, it's this speed is placed upon has a higher value than price.
Yeah. So that's a trade-off. So
that's the trade-off.
So we're tightening time here now. So let's kind of play with some things here real quick. So John, winners and losers from what you heard, if you're talking SDV language and you're thinking about this, what do you think about when you hear this, and what are some of the strategies you try to use to work with it?
Absolutely. So to the point, David, right? Because I've definitely seen it to where, the government shapes the requirement however they choose to shape it based on whatever factors. And I've even seen it to where maybe nobody is able to meet,
Yeah, there's a chance that based on it, it's just like it's something stupid got through and it's like, it's impossible. It's like the gremlin land is the only ones that can do it.
Right. And that's happened, multiple times before, right? Again, in my mind, I'm doing that business intelligence research that Mark mentioned, right? I'm trying to identify as much around whatever the government has done in the past. And I'm trying to, get into the ears of the program office if I can, right? Just to kind of, touch base, figure about proactively what their questions may be, so on and so forth, such that when something officially posts, at least
you have some intelligence, you have some understanding, you have some knowledge.
Exactly, right?
So Mark, we're in the contracting officer hat here. What can they do? What are some as they start looking at their career and their job? What
It's
are some things they
impossible.
can do?
It's an impossible task, because I've been in that situation where I've had to tell folks I will not feel comfortable signing that document. You're going to have to get a different CO, because as a CO or former CO, I am supposed to maintain my independent decision making ability. Not saying I'm obstinate. I'm not saying it's my
No,
way
you're
or the
just being,
highway.
yeah.
But if you start pointing out some really basic fundamental facts, pointing out what the FAR actually says, pointing out things that are going on in the commercial marketplace, but you have someone who says, well, hey, I really don't care about what any of those facts say. You're going to do it this way. Yeah, you're pretty much going to have to start making that decision. It's time for me to look for a different federal agency. And that's
Yep.
why you see so many civil servants dancing around, moving from agency to agency.
Because of this factor. Interesting. Which then puts the government again behind the ball, because they don't have the expertise, the domain knowledge. They're losing, like you said, the research skills to go in and look for different vendors in the areas that they're procuring from.
Or the presumption of familiarity. Like, for example, I used to do a lot of lodging contracts for DOD.
Mhm.
And after a couple years, I could say I was a quasi expert in lodging.
Yeah,
I did so much of it.
you would be. Yeah, that's what I want. For me, I think that'd be great. Does the government appreciate that?
I believe at the time my customer did. But again, you get a new supervisor, you get a different person running the office who says, hey, in my prior office, we did the following. And then you get in sort of like this what I call a death spiral.
Yeah.
Because you're like, yes, but we've had like significant success doing the following. As a matter of fact, using the GSA per diem price ceilings as a barometer for how much a hotel room should cost. For example, we're getting that same 3-star hotel, instead of $125 a night, we're actually getting now for $60 a night, because that hotel wants to do business with Uncle Sam. We're getting a great deal because we're buying in bulk. But if we take your solution, we're back to being pretty close to that GSA ceiling at $120 a room night. So, and then all of a sudden you realize, well, wait a second, I just achieved these great results for the last 2 or 3 years. I got a new supervisor who has what he or she believes is a better way to build a mousetrap. Now we're paying double for the same exact service.
But they think it's better.
They think it's better. And all of a sudden you realize now there's turmoil, because that program office has to get more dollars, and they may. So now they're paying, in essence, double for that same hotel room for the same type of events that's been going on for years. And then, as an acquisition professional, you realize, hey, I take pride in my work and getting that best possible deal, that best value for the government, without sacrificing some basic element of quality. Maybe it's time to me look for a different office. And that goes on every day.
So this is really, we got so many offshoots that we can do on this for sure. And the best thing for you, Mark, is that you have both hats, right? You've spent years and years and years on the procurement side. You understand the dynamics. And now you're here on the vendor side, and you understand the dynamics, what vendors have to work at. And so we're going to continue to share great information like this. Contracting officers, we definitely want to see you coming out, because Mark can help you with some tips and tricks as well. For vendors who want to work in this environment, we got lots of different thoughts and ideas as well. Mark, any final thought on winning and losing?
Yeah, well, 2 things. When it comes to the contracting officers and the contract specialists out there, the folks in the 1102 career field, I was not attempting to sound pejorative when it comes to you.
No, you weren't, and you weren't at all. You're saying that you're telling people the challenges.
It's about an impossible task for these folks. And I feel bad, because I was in the same shoes. And at some point I realized, hey, I don't want to do this for another, 10 years. Maybe the private sector, or let me give the private sector a chance. I can always go back to the government. So my 2 thoughts are these. If you're a CO, and I would not be afraid to ask the program office why you cannot define your requirement to set the baseline level of technical acceptability to make the selection method LPTA, even though the FAR says you now got to justify that in writing. And I believe there was a lot of politics behind that decision.
Yep.
And when it comes to the vendors trying to sell to the government, again, I appreciate that almost impossible task you're stuck with, competing once every five. It's like going to the Olympics every 5 years, and you have no practices.
It's just, yeah, it's crazy. So, man, we really appreciate your time. We'll have lots more informational sessions like this. Very enlightening. Folks, we thank you for your time. Continue to watch out for us. SDV Office, SDV Medical. We're out there to help you acquire things simply. We're also out there to help educate, support competition, as well as the government, because we just want people to get the things they need to get as effectively and efficiently as possible. With that said, thank you so much. Thank you, Mark.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure.